"He's harmless," my son whispered at the graduation party. I heard every word. Weeks later, a stranger's post went viral. "That's what a real dad looks like." That same night, my wife was on her knees in a hallway begging. They had no idea what Harmless was capable of. My name is Clayton Merritt. I'm 48 years old, and I've spent the last 22 years of my life being the kind of man my father raised me to be: steady, reliable, never the loudest voice in the room, but always the last one standing when things got hard. I work as a lift and industrial equipment technician. I've kept machines running in hospitals, factories, and office towers across 3 counties. My hands know the weight of responsibility. They've known it since I was 19 years old, and my father handed me a toolbox and told me that a man's worth is measured by what he fixes, not what he breaks. I married Donna when I was 26. She was 24, bright-eyed, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make it feel warmer. We built something together: a house on Clearwater Drive, a life that didn't look glamorous from the outside, but felt solid from the inside. 2 boys. Tyler, our oldest, who fought through speech delays as a little kid with a determination that made me proud every single day. I drove him to the speech therapist twice a week for 2 years straight. Never once complained. That boy earned every word that came out of his mouth. Brody came along a year later, quick and sharp as a tack, and somehow the 2 of them ended up finishing high school in the same year, because Tyler had started a year late. I paid for every lesson, every sport, every school trip. I sold my father's old hunting rifle to cover braces for Tyler when money was tight. I missed 3 of my own birthdays working overtime so the boys could go to summer camp. Not once did I wave that in anyone's face. That wasn't how I was raised. The graduation ceremony was held at Millbrook High School Gymnasium on a warm Saturday morning in late May. I got there 30 minutes early, claimed a spot in the 3rd row of the bleachers with a clear sight line to the stage. I had the same digital camera I'd brought to every science fair, every basketball game, every school play since the boys were in elementary school. The gym smelled like fresh floor polish and nervous energy. Families packed every row, programs fanning the air. Donna sat 2 sections over with her sister. She told me the night before she wanted to sit with family. I didn't push it. When Tyler walked across that stage, his tassel swinging, I felt the kind of pride that lives in your chest like a second heartbeat. Then he stopped at the microphone. He looked out the crowd, cleared his throat, and said the words that rearranged everything I thought I understood about my own life. "Brody, and I want to thank the man who always believed in us," Tyler said, his voice steady and clear. The same voice I'd watched him fight for over 2 painful years of therapy. "Our real dad. Thanks for never giving up on us." The applause was polite, the kind that fills a room without knowing why. Tyler wasn't looking at me. He was looking toward the far side of the bleachers, where a man stood with his arms folded and a self-satisfied look on his face. I recognized him. Scott Hargrove, former youth football coach, the man I'd written checks to for 3 seasons so my boys could learn the game. Donna was clapping. She didn't look my way. Not once. I kept my face still. I've worked in tight spaces under heavy machinery. I know how to hold steady when something shifts without warning. The camera stayed up, my hands didn't shake, and I let the moment pass over me like a pressure wave, felt it, absorbed it, didn't let it show. After the ceremony, families clustered around the graduates. I watched Tyler and Brody take pictures with Scott and Donna like it was the most natural thing in the world. A few neighbors who'd known our family for years shot me uncomfortable glances. One man, Dave Kowalski from 2 streets over, walked up and put a hand on my shoulder. "Hell of a day," he said quietly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Beautiful morning for it." I replied, and meant it. I didn't push through the crowd to reach my sons. I didn't call their names. I walked out through the side door, into the parking lot, past the rows of cars with college bumper stickers and proud parent magnets. My truck was parked at the far end, away from the noise. I got in, set the camera on the passenger seat, and sat there for a long moment with both hands on the wheel. No rage, no tears, just a silence so complete it had weight to it. By the time I pulled out of the lot, something had already shifted inside me, slow and quiet, the way a foundation settles before anyone notices the walls have moved. I drove home on the same roads I'd driven 10,000 times before, and somewhere between the 3rd stoplight and my own driveway, I made a decision I didn't yet have words for. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling while Donna breathed slowly beside me, and I thought about the first time Tyler said my name without stumbling. He'd been 5 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with his flashcards spread out in front of him, and he looked up at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "Dad," so clean and clear that I'd had to leave the room for a minute. That was my son. That was the kid I'd driven to therapy twice a week through 2 winters. And last Saturday morning, that same voice had carved me right out his own story. I got up at 5, pulled on my work clothes out of habit, and went down to the garage. My workshop isn't much to look at. Pegboard walls, a scarred workbench, fluorescent lighting that hums just loud enough to let you know it's there. But it's mine in a way that the rest of the house stopped being a long time ago, though I didn't fully understand that until recently. I sat on my stool and looked at the shelf above the bench. Tyler's old baseball glove sat there, the leather gone soft with age. Next to it, a faded blue ribbon, second place from the county science fair, Brody, age 11. He'd stayed up past midnight 3 nights in a row to finish that project. I'd sat with him every one of those nights. I was still staring at that ribbon when I heard Donna's heels on the hardwood above me. A few minutes later, she appeared in the doorway in her weekend clothes, coffee in hand, with the look she uses when she's already decided how a conversation is going to go. "You've been quiet since the ceremony," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm fine," I told her. She took a slow sip. "You're not going to make this into something, are you, Clayton?" It was a speech. The boys were excited. I turned back to the workbench and picked up a wrench I didn't need. "I heard them just fine, Donna. They're 18 and 19. They don't always think before they speak." Her voice had that smooth, practiced quality, the one that used to reassure me and lately just made me tired. "Scott's been around more lately. They're attached. It doesn't mean anything." I set the wrench down. "How long has he been around?" The pause was half a second too long. "Don't do that," she said, and walked back toward the kitchen. I stayed in the workshop until the sun was fully up. Then I crossed to the far corner where my old floor safe sat, its gray paint worn down at the dial from years of use. I spun the combination by feel, 3 turns right, 2 left, 1 right, and pulled the door open. Inside, neatly folded beneath a copy of our mortgage deed and a sealed envelope from my father's estate, was the folder. The college fund. 4 years of disciplined saving, overtime pay, tax returns, the modest inheritance my father had left me with the specific instruction that it go toward the boy's education. I had honored that instruction to the letter. I picked up the folder and held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Then I found the envelope from my father's estate, the one I hadn't opened in over a year. I'd looked at it before, but never read it all the way through. I didn't know why. Some instinct told me to wait. I broke the seal and unfolded the single handwritten page inside. My father had written it 3 months before he passed, in the careful block letters he used when he wanted to make sure something was understood. "Clayton, I've watched you build your life, and I'm proud of the man you are. But I've also watched you carry people who don't look back to see how tired you've gotten. Your Donna is sharp, and she knows how to make a man feel chosen right up until she doesn't need him to feel that way anymore. I hope I'm wrong. I probably am. But if I'm not, remember that the money I'm leaving you is earned by a man who never let anyone spend it on something that didn't deserve it. Don't you do any different." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and set it on top of the fun folder. My father had written that letter 15 years ago. 15 years. And I was only reading it now, sitting in a workshop full of objects that proved I had loved my family without condition, holding a fund that was about to change direction. I closed the safe, clicked off the light, and went upstairs to make coffee. Donna was on the phone in the kitchen, laughing at something, her back to me. I poured my coffee and went to sit on the back porch, where the morning was still quiet enough to think clearly. The decision hadn't fully formed yet, but the foundation for it had just been poured. Donna announced the graduation party on Sunday morning like it was already settled, because in her mind, it was a small gathering, she said, just family and a few close friends. She'd already texted the invite list. I found out about it the way I found out about a lot of things in that house, after the decision had been made, and all that remained was for me to adjust. I didn't argue. I nodded, poured a second cup of coffee, and went to work on a service call that had come in over the weekend. A freight elevator in a cold storage facility 40 minutes north of town. The kind of job that takes full concentration and leaves no room for anything else, which was exactly what I needed. When I got home that evening, the house already smelled like grilled chicken and store-bought cake. Donna had rearranged the living room furniture without asking. A banner hung above the doorway. "Congrats, grads," in the boys' school colors. People I barely recognized were already filling the kitchen. Scott Hardgrove was leaning against the counter near the refrigerator like he'd been there 100 times before. Maybe he had. He was mid-conversation with Ray Donnelly, Donna's brother, family law attorney, a man who had the handshake of a politician and the instincts of a shark. Ray caught my eye from across the room and gave me a nod that managed to be both polite and condescending at the same time. I moved through the party like a man walking a job site, steady, purposeful, taking in everything without reacting to any of it. I refilled the ice bucket. I carried extra chairs in from the garage. I nodded when people thanked me for hosting. At one point, a neighbor named Carl, who'd coached Little League with me for 2 seasons, grabbed my elbow and said quietly, "Hell of a thing, Clayton. You doing all right?" "Right as rain," I told him, and meant it more than he understood. I handed Tyler an envelope near the hallway table, a card with $200 in it, the same thing I'd done for every birthday since he was old enough to spend money. He took it without looking up, set it on the table with the other cards, and walked back towards Scott without a word. The envelope sat there all evening, untouched, slowly migrating toward the edge of the table as other things piled on top of it. I watched that envelope from across the room and felt something settle in my chest like cooling metal. Later, I was carrying empty bottles out to the recycling bin in the garage when I heard them through the open kitchen window. Brody's voice first, low and amused. "Did you see his face at the ceremony? He just sat there." Then Donna, hushed but not hushed enough. "He'll get over it. He always does." And then Brody again, quieter this time, but still clear enough to reach me through the screen. "He won't do anything about it. He's harmless." I stood in the garage with a bottle in each hand and let those words settle into me the way cold air settles into a building when someone leaves a door open. Harmless. The man who'd paid for everything, shown up for everything, sacrificed everything, reduced to harmless. Like a piece of furniture too heavy to move and too worn out to matter. I set the bottles down carefully, went back inside, smiled at Carl's wife when she thanked me for the food. And that night, after the last guest left and Donna was loading the dishwasher with her back to me, I went to the workshop, opened the safe, and transferred every cent of the college fund into a new account under my name alone. It took 11 minutes. The balance on the original account read 0 before midnight. Ray Donnelly could talk all he wanted about joint marital assets. But what Ray didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already had a quiet conversation with my own attorney 2 weeks ago. Not because I planned this, but because my gut had been sending signals I'd finally stopped ignoring. The foundation, as it turned out, had been poured weeks before they handed anyone a diploma. My attorney's name is Gerald Fitch. He's been practicing in Clanton County for 31 years, drives a 10-year-old Buick, and doesn't waste a single word. I'd called him the Monday after the graduation and told him I needed to move quietly and move fast. He told me to come in Wednesday morning and bring every financial document I had. I brought a folder 2 inches thick. We met in his corner office on the 2nd floor of a brick building downtown, the kind of office that smells like old paper and reasonable judgment. Gerald spread the documents across his desk, read through them with the focused attention of a man who charges by the hour and earns every cent, and then looked up at me over his reading glasses. "You want to establish a charitable trust before any divorce proceedings begin," he said. It wasn't a question. "I want the fund to go to people who will use it the way it was intended," I told him. "Education. Kids who don't have anyone in their corner." Gerald nodded slowly. "There's a window. If the transfer is completed before any legal action is filed against you, and the recipient is a legitimate charitable organization, it's clean." He tapped the folder. "This fund is in your name alone. Always has been." That was something Donna had never paid attention to. The account had been opened under my name, funded entirely from my earnings and my father's estate, and she had never once asked to see a statement. She trusted that it was there the way she trusted that the furnace would run and the mortgage would be paid. Because I handle those things, and they simply happened. Gerald drew up the paperwork that same week. The recipient was the Millbrook Learning Center, a nonprofit that provided educational therapy and classroom support for children with developmental delays. It was the same type of program that had helped Tyler when he was 5 years old, sitting at a kitchen table with flashcards, learning to say his own father's name without stumbling. That felt right in a way I didn't need to explain to anyone. I signed the transfer documents on a Thursday afternoon. Gerald signed as witness. The notary stamped it. The date was recorded, and 9 years of careful saving changed direction in less time than it takes to replace a brake caliper. When I walked out into the afternoon sun, Ray Donnelly was just pulling into the parking lot across the street. He didn't see me. He was on his phone, laughing at something, already confident in a plan he didn't know had already failed. I got in my truck and drove back to work. I had a hydraulic platform unit to service at a warehouse on Route 9, and the afternoon was clear, and for the first time in a week, I felt like the ground under my feet was exactly where I placed it. That evening, Donna called while I was finishing up the service job. She'd gotten an automated notice from the university about an upcoming tuition payment deadline. "Did you see the email from Jefferson State?" she asked. "I'll look into it," I said. A pause. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll look into it, Donna." She hung up without saying anything else. I pocketed the phone, finished tightening the access panel on the hydraulic unit, and packed my tools. On the drive home, I thought about Ray Donnelly's car in that parking lot, and wondered how long it would take him to figure out that the door he planned to walk through had been quietly bricked over from the inside. Not long now. I've always believed that information is a tool. You pick it up when you need it, use it correctly, and put it away when the job is done. Emotion is fine in its place, but when you're standing under a machine that weighs 3 tons and one wrong move puts you in the ground, you learn real fast that feelings don't tighten bolts. Facts do. So 2 weeks after the graduation, I hired a private investigator. His name was Dennis Calhoun, a retired county sheriff's deputy who now ran a one-man firm out of a rented office above a dry cleaner on Maple Street. A friend from work had used him for a custody matter 2 years back and called him thorough and discreet. Those were the 2 qualities I needed most. I met Calhoun on a Tuesday evening after my last service call. His office was small and clean, 2 chairs, a desk, a window that looked out over the parking lot. He listened to what I needed without writing anything down, which told me he'd heard versions of this before. "Scott Hargrove," he said, repeating the name back to me like he was filing it. "Former youth football coach. Currently doing what exactly?" "That's part of what I want to know," I told him. Calhoun delivered his report 10 days later in a plain manila envelope. I read it at my workbench with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. Scott Hargrove, age 47, was not the man my sons had publicly anointed as their real father in front of 400 people. He was carrying 2 unpaid personal loans totaling just over $31,000, both more than 90 days past due. He had an outstanding tax lien from the IRS dating back 3 years, just under $18,000. 2 civil suits were pending against him in county court, one from a former business partner over a failed landscaping venture, one from a landlord over 6 months of unpaid commercial rent. His truck, a late-model pickup he drove like a man who owned things, was 9 payments behind. The lender had already sent a repossession notice. I set the report down and looked at the wall of my workshop for a long moment. My sons had stood on that stage and handed the title of real dad to a man who couldn't keep the lights on. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly. What I felt was the particular clarity that comes when the thing you suspected turns out to be precisely as bad as you feared. There's a grim relief in being right, even when being right costs you something. I folded Calhoun's report and placed it in the same folder where I kept Gerald's trust documents. Not to use as a weapon, not to wave in anyone's face. I just wanted it there. Evidence that the world the boys thought they were walking toward was built on a foundation full of hidden fractures. That same week, Donna's brother Ray called me for the first time since the graduation. He was cordial in the careful way that lawyers are cordial when they're working up to something. "Clayton, I think it'd be a good idea if the 4 of us sat down," he said, meaning himself, Donna, me, and presumably a neutral surface where he could lay out what he considered the terrain. "Sure," I said. "Set something up." He suggested Saturday lunch, a restaurant downtown called the Millwork, exposed brick white tablecloths, the kind of place where people go when they want a conversation to feel civilized. I agreed without enthusiasm and spent the next 4 days going about my work. The lunch was Ray's production from start to finish. He arrived 5 minutes early and had already ordered water and bread by the time I sat down. Donna was dressed for the occasion, composed, hands folded. Ray had a leather portfolio on the table beside his plate like a prop. He started with pleasantries, then made his pivot about 12 minutes in, smooth as a man who does this for a living. The boys needed a solid start. Both families wanted what was best. Surely I understood that any disruption to the college fund at this stage would only hurt the kids, and nobody wanted that. He said the word partnership twice in the same sentence. I listened to all of it. I let him finish. Then I looked at Donna and said, "Is this what you want to say, or is this what Ray is saying for you?" Donna's jaw tightened. "Don't do that. I'm asking a genuine question." Ray jumped back in, recalibrated, tried the softer angle. He mentioned the boys' hard work, their potential, the years I'd invested in them. He framed it as honoring my own contribution. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and said, "Ray, the fund is gone." The table went quiet in the way a room goes quiet when a door slams in the distance. "What does that mean?" Ray said, not a question, the way he said it. "It means it's been transferred to a charitable trust. Legally, cleanly, before any proceedings of any kind. Gerald Fitch handled it. You're welcome to call him." I set the glass down. The Millbrook Learning Center will be receiving the funds. They work with kids who have developmental delays. Kids who need someone in their corner. I paused just long enough. You might recognize the type. Ray's face didn't change, but his hand moved to the portfolio and stopped there, as if he'd reached for a tool and found the drawer empty. Donna looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. Not anger, not grief, but the particular stunned look of someone who has just realized the game ended several moves ago and they weren't watching the board. I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and stood up. "I'll get the check," I said. The university sent its automated reminder about the tuition deadline on a Wednesday. The formal warning notice followed 4 days later. A physical letter, certified mail, addressed to both Tyler and Brody at the Clearwater Drive house. I know this because Gerald Fitch's assistant called to let me know the timeline had arrived exactly as anticipated. I was on a service call at a medical facility on the east side of town when Donna called the first time. I let it go to voicemail. When she called back 9 minutes later, I answered. Her voice had the tight, pressurized quality of a woman holding something together with both hands. "There are letters here. From Jefferson State. Both boys." A pause. "Clayton, what is going on? What do the letters say?" I asked. "They say tuition and housing haven't been paid, and if it's not resolved by end of the week, they lose their enrollment slots." Her voice rose on the last few words. "I need you to tell me right now that this is some kind of error." I crouched down to check the tension on a cable guide, phone against my shoulder. "It's not an error." The silence on her end lasted long enough that I could hear her breathing shift. "You need to fix this," she said, quieter now, but harder. "I don't, actually," I said. She hung up. 20 minutes later, Tyler called. I let it ring. Then Brody. Then Donna again. By the time I finished the service call and loaded my van, there had been 11 attempts between the three of them in just under 2 hours. What happened next I heard from Carl Kowalski, whose nephew worked in the admissions office at Jefferson State. Donna had driven the boys to campus that same afternoon, walked them straight to the enrollment services window, and demanded an explanation with the kind of energy that makes clerks reach for their supervisors. The supervisor pulled up the account, turned the monitor around so they could see it, and showed them the transaction record. The fund had been withdrawn the morning after graduation. The balance was zero. The transfer was time-stamped, notarized, and assigned to a charitable recipient. There was no dispute to file, no reversal to request, and no payment plan available for an account that no longer existed. Ray Donnelly showed up at the office an hour later, according to Carl. He reviewed the documentation, asked 3 sharp questions, and received 3 factual answers. The fund had been held solely in my name. No joint ownership, no shared account status, no legal mechanism for Donna to claim interest in it retroactively. The transfer had been executed before any separation proceedings were initiated. Every box checked. Ray left without filing anything. That evening, I was in my workshop refinishing a cabinet door when the boys arrived. They knocked, which surprised me, since they hadn't knocked on that door in years. Tyler came in first, Brody a step behind him. They stood just inside the doorway, looking the way young men look when the floor has dropped out and they haven't figured out how to hold themselves yet. Tyler spoke first. "We didn't think you'd actually do anything." I kept the sanding block moving along the grain. I know. That money was for our school, Brody said, and there was an edge in it. But underneath the edge was something younger and more uncertain. I set the sanding block down and turned to face them. That money was something I earned and saved for 19 years because I believed in your future. On the day you graduated, you told a room full of people that I wasn't part of it. I held Brody's eyes, then Tyler's. I believed you. Neither of them had an answer for that. Tyler opened his mouth once and closed it again. You've got a week before the deadline, I said. I'd start making phone calls. They left without slamming the door, which was something. I listened to their footsteps cross the driveway, heard the car start, heard it pull away. Then I turned the workshop light back on, picked up the sanding block, and went back to work. The cabinet door wasn't going to finish itself. Gerald Fitch had given me 2 pieces of advice at our first meeting, and I'd followed both of them. The first was about the trust. The second was about the house. The property on Clearwater Drive, he'd said, spreading the deed across his desk. It's in your name. Has been since the purchase. You refinanced once, 7 years ago, and Donna was listed as a co-borrower on the loan, but the title itself remains solely in yours. He'd looked at me over his glasses. That gives you options before anyone files anything. I thought about those options for 3 weeks. By the time Ray Donnelly called to let me know he'd be initiating divorce proceedings on Donna's behalf, I'd already made my move. The family I rented to was named the Garcias, Eduardo and his wife Patrice, 3 kids between the ages of 6 and 12, currently living in a 2-bedroom rental on the other side of town that was too small and too expensive. Eduardo worked road maintenance for the county. Patrice ran the checkout at the grocery store on Route 12, where I'd been buying coffee creamer for 15 years. I'd spoken to them through a property management contact the week before, explained the situation plainly, and set a rental rate that was fair without being charity. They moved in on a Saturday morning, 3 days before Ray filed. I know the exact moment Donna found out, because Ray called me himself, not to negotiate, but because I think he needed to hear my voice to confirm what he'd just been told was actually true. His professional composure was intact, but there was a quality underneath it, like a man who has just stepped onto a staircase and found one fewer step than expected. The house has been leased, he said. That's right, I said. You understand I'm going to challenge this. You're welcome to, I said. Gerald's number is in the bar directory. You two can work out the details. Ray did challenge it. Gerald responded. The property management agreement was dated and filed before the divorce petition. The title had never been jointly held. Eduardo and Patrice Garcia had a signed lease and a receipt for their first month's deposit. There was nothing for Ray to overturn, and he knew it within 48 hours of trying. Gerald told me Ray had gone quiet on the line in a way that suggested he was recalibrating significant portions of his strategy. Donna called me that evening. She didn't lead with anger. She'd moved past that into something more deliberate, a tone I recognized as the one she used when she was genuinely scared but didn't want it to show. Where am I supposed to go, Clayton? She said. That's something you and Ray need to figure out. I told her. I have nowhere. You have Ray, I said. You have Scott. You've had both of them for longer than I understood. I'd start there. I paused, not to be cruel, but because the next sentence needed room around it. You made choices, Donna. So did I. The difference is I made mine after yours were already in motion. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you're really doing this. I already did it, I said. I ended the call and sat in the kitchen of my rented apartment, a clean, quiet second-floor unit on Birchwood Avenue, 15 minutes from the job sites I covered most often. I'd moved in the week after the graduation, told no one except Terry Bowman and Gerald. Terry had helped me carry the workbench up the stairs without asking a single question, which was exactly the kind of man he was. Terry had stopped by the apartment 2 days after the news about the house got around. He came in, sat down at my kitchen table, and put both hands flat on the surface the way he does when he's about to say something he's already measured twice. You doing this clean? He asked. Completely clean, I said. He nodded once, slowly, the way veterans nod when they've decided something is being handled correctly. Terry had served 2 tours in his 20s, come home, spent 30 years as a pipe fitter before bad knees put him into a supervising role. He'd been through a divorce of his own 20 years back, a bad one, the kind that leaves marks, and he'd come out the other side with the particular calm of a man who has stopped expecting the world to be fair and started working with what it actually is. Then you're ahead of where most men end up, he said, and poured himself a cup of my coffee without asking, which was the highest compliment he knew how to pay. It started as a paragraph on a neighborhood Facebook group. Patricia Hollis, director of the Millbrook Learning Center, didn't know my name when she posted it. She referred to the donor only as a local man who chose to give rather than withhold. Her words, not mine. She described the fund as the largest single private contribution the center had received in its 11-year history, and she explained briefly what it would cover. 2 full years of developmental therapy services for 12 children currently on their waiting list, plus updated materials for their classroom reading program. The post was shared 47 times before I saw it. By the time I checked my phone the following morning, it had been shared 212 times and had traveled well outside the neighborhood group into the general community pages. The comments were the kind that restore a person's faith in something. People tagging friends, writing things like, "This is what it looks like when someone actually does right, and somebody's kids are going to get help they wouldn't have gotten otherwise." 3 of Donna's cousins had shared it. 2 of her book club friends had commented on it. And somewhere in that chain of shares, the connection between the anonymous donor and the Merritt family name surfaced. I don't know exactly how, but in a town of 40,000 people, these things travel along lines you don't always see until they've already arrived. Donna called at 7:15 in the morning, while I was eating breakfast before a job. Her voice had lost all its managed quality. It was raw in the way voices get when the performance has finally cost too much to maintain. "Everyone is seeing that post," she said. "People are putting it together, Clayton. They know it's the boys' fund. Then they know where it went." I said, That's not what this is about." She stopped, steadied herself. "You made us look terrible." Patricia Hollis made a post about 12 kids getting therapy they needed. I said, "Whatever that makes anyone look like is between them and what they've actually done." She tried 3 more angles in the next 4 minutes. I let each one land and responded to it without raising my voice, because a man who has already made his moves doesn't need volume to make his point. When she finally ran out of angles, I told her to have Ray call Gerald, ended the call, and finished my breakfast. The neighborhood summer block party happened to fall that same weekend, an annual event on Clearwater Drive that the neighborhood association had been running for 12 years. I almost skipped it. Terry talked me out of skipping it over the phone on Friday evening, in his economical way. "You've got nothing to hide from. Show up." I showed up. I was standing near the coolers talking to Dave Kowalski when Donna arrived with Tyler and Brody in tow, moving across the lawn with the focused energy of a woman who has decided that a public setting is her best available leverage. She'd spotted me before I saw her, and by the time I turned, she was already inside conversational range, her voice calibrated to carry just far enough. "You want to explain to people here what you did," she said. "Taking money you saved for your own children and giving it away because you were angry?" Several conversations nearby slowed. A few heads turned. I looked at her steadily. "I saved that money for my children's education because I believed I was their father." I let that settle for exactly 1 second. On graduation day, they corrected that belief in front of 400 people. I respected their position. A woman behind me, Janet Ferris, whose daughter had been in Brody's class, made a sound that wasn't quite a word but wasn't neutral either. Donna pressed forward. "You've hurt them. You've humiliated this family." "The only thing I did," I said, keeping my voice even and clear, "was stop paying for a version of this family that I wasn't allowed to be part of." I glanced at Tyler, then Brody. Both of them were looking at the ground. If that's humiliating, I'd ask who started the humiliation and where. The lawn had gone quiet enough that the music from the far end of the block felt distant. Donna's face was rigid. She looked around at the faces watching her, neighbors who'd known our family for years, who'd seen me at every school event, every holiday block party, every early morning shoveling the walk without being asked, and something shifted in her expression. Not remorse. Not yet. But the first flickering recognition that the room was not with her. She turned and walked away. Tyler and Brody followed without looking at me, which was the version of this I'd expected. Dave Kowalski handed me a fresh drink without a word. I took it. Somewhere across the lawn, someone turned the music back up. That night, back in my apartment, I saw that Patricia's post had been shared over 400 times. One comment near the top read, "That's what a father actually looks like." I put my phone down, face up on the kitchen table, and let the evenings settle around me. I didn't need the comment, but I won't pretend it didn't land somewhere real. The divorce proceedings moved the way Gerald said they would, steadily, without drama, because there was nothing left to fight over that hadn't already been resolved. Ray Donnelly had filed his challenges, received Gerald's responses, and gone quiet on 2 of the 3 fronts he'd opened. The house lease stood. The charitable trust stood. What remained was the division of the remaining marital assets, which were modest enough that the conversation was more administrative than adversarial. I had moved into my apartment on Birchwood Avenue with a mattress, my tools, a coffee maker, and the cabinet I'd been refinishing in the workshop. I finished it in the 2nd bedroom, and it fit against the wall like it had always been there. The apartment suited me. It was clean, quiet, and entirely mine in the way that nothing in the Clearwater Drive house had felt like mine for a long time. Tyler called me on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the orientation deadline had passed. He'd enrolled at Jefferson State on a reduced load, 2 classes instead of 5, paid for through a combination of a Pell Grant and a part-time job he'd picked up at a hardware distribution warehouse on the east side of town. His voice on the phone was different from the voice he'd used at the graduation. Quieter, more careful about where it landed. "I wanted you to know I'm going," he said. "To school. Just slower than I planned." "That's a good decision," I said. A pause. "The job's not bad. Warehouse work. I kind of like it. Physical work teaches you things a classroom doesn't," I said. "Your grandfather built a career with his hands. There's no shame in starting there." Another pause. Longer. "Dad," the word came out carefully, like he was testing whether it still fit. "I'm sorry for the speech. I've been trying to figure out how to say that for 2 months, and I keep not finding the right version, so I'm just saying it." I sat with that for a moment. "I hear you, Tyler. That's it. That's a start," I said. "Starts are enough for now." He seemed to accept that. We talked for another 10 minutes about the warehouse job, about his 2 classes, about nothing in particular. When we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a while, feeling the particular weight of a door that has been opened 1 careful inch after being shut for a long time. Brody hadn't called. That was his choice, and I left it alone. What I wasn't expecting was Donna. It was a Saturday night in late August, warm enough that I had the apartment window open and could hear the neighborhood, a dog somewhere, a car with a loose exhaust pipe, the low murmur of the couple in a unit below watching television. I was reading at the kitchen table when I heard footsteps in the hallway stop outside my door. 3 knocks. Measured. Not panicked. I opened it to find Donna, standing in the fluorescent glow of the hallway light, dressed in clothes that said she'd thought about what to wear, and then try to look like she hadn't. She was holding her phone in one hand, pressed flat against her thigh. She looked smaller than she had at the block party. Not diminished, just real, in a way she hadn't let herself be for years. "I needed to talk to you face to face," she said. "All right," I said. I didn't move back from the doorway. She looked past me briefly, then back. "Ray told me there's no legal path forward on the house or the trust. He said I should. He said to focus on what's left and move on." She paused. "I don't know if I agree with that." "What do you disagree with?" I asked. "The moving on part," she said, and something shifted in her face. "Clayton, I know what I did. I know what I let the boys do. I know I didn't look at you once at that ceremony." Her voice was even, but the evenness was costing her. "I don't have an explanation that makes it make sense. She stopped. Her jaw moved. "I need you to know I see it now." "What do you see?" I asked. She pressed her lips together. Then, slowly, she lowered herself to one knee in the hallway, the way a person does when they've decided that words at eye level have run out. Her hand came up and rested against the doorframe. "I see what I threw away," she said. "And I'm asking you, not Ray, not through lawyers, just me asking you, if there's any part of this that isn't finished." The door down the hall opened 2 inches. A neighbor I'd seen in passing. He took one look at the scene and quietly pulled it shut again. I looked at Donna for a long time, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with the clear eyes of a man who has done his grieving already and come out the other side, knowing exactly what he knows. "You asked me the same question once before," I said. "Night I proposed. You said you'd never ask me to be anything other than what I was." I kept my voice gentle but level. "The answer tonight is the same as that question deserved back then. I'm exactly what I always was, Donna. The problem was never me." I removed her hand from the doorframe with both of mine, folded it between my palms for exactly 1 moment, and then stepped back and closed the door. I stood in my kitchen and listened to her footsteps fade down the hallway, then the stairwell door, then nothing. I went back to my book. The window was still open. The night air came through it slow and clean, the way late summer air does when it's finally let go of the heat. 4 months after the graduation, I drove out to Lake Heron. My father had taken me there every fall during deer season. Not to hunt, as it turned out, but to sit near the water and talk about the things fathers and sons talk about when there's enough distance from everyday life to say them honestly. We'd park at the gravel pull-out off County Road 7, walk the pine needle path down to the flat rocks at the water's edge, and spend entire mornings doing what looked from the outside like nothing at all. The last time I'd been there was the autumn before he passed. I've been meaning to go back for years. Something about the graduation, or more accurately, what came after it, had cleared the path. I arrived before sunrise, thermos in hand, and found the flat rocks exactly as I remembered them. The water was gray in the pre-dawn light, smooth enough to reflect the treeline. A great blue heron stood motionless at the far edge of the shallows, doing what herons do, waiting with a patience that makes every other kind of waiting look amateur. I sat on the cold rock and poured coffee from the thermos and didn't think about Donna. Didn't think about Ray's last email, which Gerald had answered yesterday with characteristic precision. Didn't think about Brody's continued silence, or Tyler's warehouse job, or Scott Hardro's truck being repossessed sometime in the next 30 days according to a brief follow-up note from Dennis Calhoun, who'd heard it through a county court contact. I thought about my father's letter, the one he'd written 15 years ago and never sent, knowing or hoping I'd find it when I needed it. Don't let anyone spend it on something that doesn't deserve it. He'd been talking about money. He'd also been talking about everything else. The heron moved, one slow, deliberate step along the waterline, and then went still again. The divorce would be finalized within 8 weeks, Gerald had told me. The remaining assets were split cleanly. The Clearwater Drive house would continue to generate rental income under the property management agreement, which gave me flexibility I hadn't fully calculated yet. I had options I hadn't had in 20 years of marriage, and the strange thing was that they didn't feel overwhelming. They felt like a toolbox laid open on a clean workbench, every instrument in its place, waiting to be used for something worth building. Terry Bowman had called the night before, checking in, the way he checked in, briefly, without making it a thing. "You good?" he'd asked. "Getting there," I'd said. "Good enough," he'd said, and hung up. A second heron appeared at the edge of the shallows, landing without a sound, folding its wings with a precision that seemed effortless and wasn't. The two of them stood at their separate distances, patient and still, and the water between them held the first pale suggestion of the coming sunrise. I poured the last of the coffee and held the warm cup in both hands. The Millbrook Learning Center had sent a brief letter the week before, a formal acknowledgement of the donation, and a list of the children whose therapy placements the fund had made possible. 12 names, ages 4 through 9, each one followed by a one-sentence description of their specific need. I'd read it twice and filed it in the same folder as Dennis Calhoun's report and my father's letter. 12 kids who would get help because someone had decided they deserved it. That was the version of the story I was taking with me. Not the stage, not the speech, not the hallway with Donna on her knees. Those things had happened, and they'd shaped what came next. But they weren't the headline. The headline was 12 names on a letter, and a man sitting on a flat rock at the edge of a lake his father had loved, watching herons do what they'd always done, completely at ease in the early morning quiet. I stayed until the sun was fully up. Then I packed the thermos, walked back up the pine needle path, and drove to work.